Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Teach Kelvin Your Thing session. My name is Kelvin, and today I will be learning Svelte from scratch with Geoff Rich. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
I am super duper excited. Yeah, so could we start off on the note of you just telling us who you are, what you do, how you are, how you came across Svelte, or just a bit intro would be nice.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jeff, and I'm one of the current maintainers of Svelte, which is a front-end JavaScript framework similar to React or Vue in that same space, if you're familiar with those. A lot of my contributions so far have been in the accessibility space, especially around the doc site. I've also written quite a few blog posts about Svelte and given a couple talks at meetups and conferences. Um, and for me, I first came across Svelte a few years ago. My company was trying to start a new project and figure out, what framework should we build it in, and came across Svelte, and a lot of things about it just clicked, really meshed with our priorities. So I ended up working on it, and here we are today.
Nice. Thank you for that. So I have a quick question. So before
Yeah.
you came or before Svelte came across your radar, were you using a front-end framework at the time?
It depended on the project. I had used
Okay.
React a little bit before, and then also some, just vanilla JavaScript with some .NET. Um,
Okay.
so I was familiar with some front end frameworks before, and then Svelte was a second step.
Oh, nice. So you said it clicked for you with Svelte. So what was the like why did you feel that it was like it clicked for you at the time you found Svelte after using maybe React and some other frameworks?
Yeah. So one of the things we were looking for on this project was we really cared about performance. This was actually for an airline, and it was in the situation like at an airport where the Wi-Fi might not be good. We kind of wanted to limit the amount of JavaScript we had to ship, but we also wanted all the niceties of a modern framework letting you write in components. So Svelte was a really good fit for that. And just as I got further into it, it was just really intuitive to work with. We were able to be very productive in it and work very quickly. And that's what really worked about it for us.
Nice. I like the fact you said it was intuitive because I like a framework that does not need you to learn quite a lot or to change the mental model you have or just add its own
Yeah.
complexity on the learning curve. So yeah, I really like it. So I have to a quick disclaimer. I've written a little bit of Svelte, but that was before I was working on an open source package that needed a Svelte boilerplate for the front end. And that's as far as my knowledge of Svelte is. So you're talking to a total newbie, and I'm
A
going to
little bit of
ask dumb
teasing, but not too
questions.
much.
Yeah, dumb questions, but indulge me, okay? I really want to learn Svelte. All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, so you could take it off from here.
Yeah, I just before we get started, let me just talk a little bit about what Svelte is.
Mhm,
And you titled the session "Learn Svelte from Scratch." So I'm going to try to explain this, assuming maybe you haven't used a front-end UI framework before. I am going
mhm,
to assume that some basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but
mhm.
you haven't necessarily used something like React before. Um, so at its core, Svelte is a component-driven UI framework. So it lets you build your site out of these reusable components written in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And a component is really like the building block that makes up your app. So you might think of something like an add to cart button. You have like the HTML markup, that's that button. You have some behaviors around it in the JavaScript, and you have some styles. And Svelte lets you write a component like that in a single file where you have your behavior, your markup, and your styles all in a single file for you to work with. So the core differentiator of Svelte is that Svelte is a compiler. So if you look at some other mainstream frameworks like React and Vue, they have to ship both your component code and like an entire runtime framework itself to interpret your components in the browser when the user is viewing your site. In contrast, what Svelte does is it has a build step where it looks at your component code and it compiles it down to essentially vanilla JavaScript that knows what parts of the DOM to update when state changes. It doesn't need to do those calculations in the browser. It does it ahead of time. Um, this used to be more unique. So when Svelte came out, having a UI framework that's a compiler was like pretty unique, and Now there are more frameworks that are doing it. I know Vue has started doing some compile time optimizations, and there's some frameworks gaining popularity that are also built on compilers, but it's still very core to what Svelte is. And because it's a compiler, the Svelte output is very small, as I kind of mentioned. So like your Hello World example, building a component that's pretty basic is only a few kilobytes compressed. If you contrast that to something like React, if you're using React, you're starting from a baseline like 40 kilobytes runtime. With Svelte, you don't have to add that on top of that.
Mhm.
So I have some more points I can go into, but do you have any questions about like the compiler aspect of Svelte?
Yeah, because I've browsed through the Svelte website and a couple of talks on Svelte, and I keep hearing Svelte is a compiler. And I didn't actually really understood it like 100%, but it's oh yeah, it's a compiler. There is no VDOM. It just compiles to Apple. Yeah, okay, I get it, but nope. But from your explanation, I think I get it. So Svelte will compile all your component codes and everything, and there's a build step that will output just JavaScript. So all the calculations is done ahead of time, and while you build your Svelte application, unlike other frameworks that will have to ship a runtime, which will run the code in the browser, which seems is going to make it heavier. So since we don't have that step, Svelte should be lighter.
Right.
Cool.
And Svelte actually does have a very small runtime, and that's just because there are like adding a node to the DOM, like that's a utility function in the Svelte runtime that reduces duplication because you can just call that function over and over. But
Okay.
yeah, it's very different from having to ship a whole interpreter to the browser, interpreting your components, and instead doing those calculations at runtime.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So one question. So Svelte does ship a runtime, right? But it's not as bulky as other frameworks because of the compile steps. Is that right?
right, right. It's shipping small functions like there's a function to add an attribute to an element, so you
Okay.
don't have to keep writing out element.set attribute, like things like
Okay.
that to help shrink down the bundled output, which is
Okay.
distinct from like a whole virtual DOM implementation.
Nice. I like it. Cool. Cool. Okay.
So one other thing I like about Svelte is that there's a lot of batteries included. So I mentioned CSS. It has built-in CSS scoping, so the CSS you write only applies to that component. You don't have to go find another library to do that for you. Like the decision's already made.
Um,
Um, and also some solutions for state management, which means like you as a developer have fewer decisions to make. And again, because Svelte's a compiler, there are things we can add to the framework that other frameworks wouldn't necessarily include, such as sneak preview, like transitioning elements in and out. If React added that feature, they would have to ship it to everyone. Like they would have to have all the transition code inside React and increase React's bundle size. But because Svelte's a compiler, it can be like, oh, if you're not using transitions, I don't have to include my code handling transitions, which is nice. And I really like the animation features of Svelte, which we'll dig into later.
Oh, cool. I like it. I'm excited already. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
building suspense.
yeah. Shall we?
Yeah, so I will. Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, so I'm sharing your screen now.
Cool. So what I want to start with is first I'm going to show a basic Svelte example just to get people familiar with what a Svelte component looks like. And then we'll dive into like a fuller app example that we'll build together.
Okay, so
So
okay.
yeah,
Maybe you had this. So, like, don't we need to like talk about the basic setup for Svelte? Like, if I'm going to start the Svelte application, what do I need to do and stuff?
yeah. So I have everything pre-run here
Okay.
just to speed things up. But
Yeah,
I was
sure.
going to show you go to svelte.dev, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Svelte homepage. Here are the commands you run to get started with Svelte. So
Okay.
I ran these commands and have them set up here. But if you do, I can actually just show you what this outputs.
Okay.
npm create Vite latest. Um, are you familiar with Vite at all?
Yeah, I am.
So this builds a Svelte app, and if you go into here, created a new My App folder with everything you need to get started. Um,
Okay.
so this Vite setup is actually newer for Svelte, but Vite just has such a good development experience that it just makes sense to recommend it as a starting point.
Yeah, cool.
So if you look in here, this my app is actually very similar to this counter folder I had open earlier. You have a source folder, and your entry point is going to be this app.svelte file. But actually, what I want to start with is instead this counter component, just because it's a little simpler. So this is what a svelte component looks like. So there's three main sections you have to think about. You have your script, which is like the behaviors of your component. You have your template, which is the HTML markup that makes up your component. And you have your styles, which are the styles that apply to that component. So let's go through these one by one. So here's the template, and you can put these in whatever order you want. The convention is to do script markup styles, but you could switch that around if you wanted.
Okay.
So the template is you can pretty much just write HTML with a little bit of syntactic sugar on top, which I'll go into. But you see here we have a button, and actually to make this real really quick, let me start the dev server so you can see what this is outputting.
Okay.
So
Yes.
here, this is the counter component I'm showing right now. It's this little button that you click on it, and it increments a count. So here we have the button. That's this HTML button right here. And you'll see these curly braces. And in this case, what these curly braces mean is you're dynamically inserting a value.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, we've declared a variable up here saying count equals 0. And then we can put the value of that count in the template by using these curly braces.
Okay.
So if I set this to 40, that's going to be right there. Count is 40. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I have a bit of like not a bit. Like I've been using Vue for a while, and the syntax is almost similar, but I can see we have single curly brace, but if you we have two, then
Right.
so and the on click we have like at click and is equal to sign, then the parenthesis and the function identifier, but in this case we have a curly brace for it. And I see you are declaring states just by using normal JavaScript, let's count equals 40, and it's also reactive. That's brilliant.
Yeah, let's jump into that. So
Mm-hmm.
this is something that might be very make sense to a beginner, but if you know how JavaScript normally works, it might be a little confusing or
Mm-hmm.
surprising. But again, because Svelte is a compiler, we can take this code that makes sense and does what you expect it to, and turn
Yeah.
it into something that actually works in the browser. So here we're declaring a count variable, and anytime we declare a variable, this becomes a piece of state. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll see, as I mentioned here, we're rendering it down here. And then we have this on click. So this is saying, anytime you click the button, run this increment function. Increment is just adding one to count. And anytime Svelte sees you update the value of a variable, it knows, oh, count has updated. So I need to go update this section of the text. And it's not having to recreate the button or anything. The compiler is able to analyze your template, see, okay, when count changes, I just need to update this little piece of the button text, and it just works. So let me just show you how easy something is. Like I'm going to put the count up here. I'm going to change this button to just be add one. And let's say we want to make a button that decrease the count.
Mm-hmm.
We do on click. Let's call it decrease. Again, when you see the curly braces, this references something up in the script tag. So if we do a decrease function, and then, messed up my syntax there.
Yeah.
All you have to do is count minus equals 1, or you can count equals count minus 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to do to have a decrease button. So you click on this, your count's going down. And again, all this reactivity is just triggered by assigning to a state variable, and Svelte figures out how to update your template.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where when I talk about Svelte is very low boilerplate, this is it. It's just you can't get much simpler than this,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes for components that are just very quick to write, very expressive, all of that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like I like the fact that it feels as if I'm in a JavaScript, HTML, and CSS file altogether without. So the only syntax which is not really new is the curly brace, which is for interpolating the data. But everything looks like JavaScript and HTML and CSS, and it's cool.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned that, there is Svelte does add some additional syntax to the template.
Okay.
It's very minimal. I don't think you would have a hard time learning it. But let me just show you what I mean. Like, let's say we wanted to show a message when count got over 5. Um, Svelte has a syntax called an if block, which in Vue I think there's like a v if directive, but Svelte doesn't do it as an attribute. So
Mm-hmm.
we write
Oh,
if
okay.
count is greater than 5, then the count is more than 5.
Hmm.
Now when we run this, shows. When we decrease, it goes away.
Hmm. Nice.
So there is some very light template syntax. There's a separate syntax for like iterating over an array that I'll show when we get into our other demo. Um, but it's not a lot, and maybe it's just because I've gotten used to it. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
easy to use for me.
Yeah. It's the if block kind of feel like something like Blade in Laravel because I've had a past
Mm,
experience with it. So yeah, it's like a yeah. I think I get it. And end if yeah, it does make sense. But
yeah,
it's strange coming from Vue, I admit, but it's cool. It's still fine.
it's strange for people coming from React too. Where
Okay.
you do something like
Yeah.
a and or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. One other thing I want to call out. Well, there's actually two other things, but you mentioned the style block. I just want to emphasize these styles only apply to the component. You might notice we're like targeting the button element directly, which isn't usually something you want to do in CSS because like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to apply to every button. And what if I want to change that? Um, but this rule only applies to buttons in the component. And if I go out to like this app, which is like the whole component making up the page, and I add a button out here, I don't have a border. Like this one does not get the red border. So these styles only apply inside the component.
Oh,
Um,
nice. So
it's
I
very
think
nice to work with.
yeah. I think I got the reason, but like I'm just trying to make a bit of comparison with Vue that I'm familiar with. So in Vue we have like a style block as well, but if you want to make the styles for that component, you put like a scoped attribute on it.
Right.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's useful. For example, maybe you have like a parent component that you want the style to trickle down to the children. Can you do that, or it's not a convention that is used in Svelte?
So you can do it. So like, let's go to this
Mm-hmm.
app component. And let's say we wanted to style these buttons. Um, so what you do, so we have this main tag here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to target main. So children of main. And
Okay.
then I'm going to use the special global syntax.
Oh,
So
okay.
this global lets you break outside the component. So I'm saying,
Hmm.
but um,
Okay.
there's a difference between this and if I took away the main. Let me show you what it does first. Well, like, let's say I wanted to do, I don't know, color pink. That came into the component because we explicitly said
Global. Yeah.
target all buttons.
Okay.
But it's
Nice.
important to put this main first because if we didn't have this, this creates a rule where like a button anywhere in your application would be styled, right?
Okay.
Like even a button in a completely separate component that's
Y-
not a descendant of this component.
Okay.
And by
Yeah.
putting main, we scope it to only children of this component.
Yeah. That makes sense. So the main is like the main element on this app, the Svelte. Yeah, it's fine. So I think
Well, main
okay.
is like this HTML tag.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Sure.
main, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. I get that. So I think because Svelte it's a compiler having something like dot colon global which reads almost like a function because you're passing buttons to the global. So I think that makes it really um trivial to do as Svelte. Yeah. So what do you call that? The colon global identifier.
Um, I don't actually. I just call it global. I think global selector maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say in most cases you would want to use component scope styles.
Yeah, sure,
And
definitely.
there's
I
other
get that.
ways of getting in there, like CSS variables
Yeah.
are a good way to affect them. But yeah, this escape hatch is here if you need it.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes complete sense to me. All right. So we could definitely move on.
Yeah, there is one more thing I want to show, and this is
Okay.
like another key feature of Svelte,
Okay.
um, and that's the reactive statements or reactive variables. Have you seen those at all?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
So what a reactive statement? So let's say you wanted to add a console log every time count changes. So what you could do is do count is count. Um, but this script tag only runs once. So if we look in the browser, it only says count is 0. I increment this, that's not running again.
Okay.
Um, so what you might think, okay, so one option would be I can move this console log inside the different functions, so I always get this log when it changes. But then, so that'll work. But you've had to duplicate this code, and you have to remember to keep it updated, like if
Mm-hmm.
you change count anywhere else. So that's not
Yeah.
a great solution.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, Svelte has this special syntax, which is valid JavaScript, but Svelte is, I wouldn't say abusing it, but taking ownership of it. Um,
Okay.
and if you do colon, $colon,
Uh-huh.
we get the same behavior.
Oh boy.
I know,
Is
but it's actually great.
okay.
What
Is that
what this
spelled
means is
magic?
it's Svelte magic.
Okay.
Anytime it sees, hey, you're using count in here. So what this $colon means is anytime count changes, I'm going to rerun this statement.
Okay.
So it's a very declarative way. We don't have to remember, like, oh, anytime I update count, I need to also call this console log. We can just say, hey, I want this statement to run anytime count changes. Svelte, you figure out when to run it, when count is it being updated, and just take care of it for me. So that is the reactive statement in Svelte.
Nice. So yeah. Again, in Vue we have something called computed properties. So
Mm-hmm.
or watches. So to watch a state, then to do something else. So
It's a
uh,
combination of those, yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. So if you have more than one state, it's actually going to check for both states if any of them changes, right?
Yeah, if you had like, state two,
Mhm.
state
Yeah.
three, like any variables referenced in the statement will
Wow.
trigger a rerun when they change.
That's convenient, really.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
The
if we wanted to have a
yeah.
doubled variable,
Mhm.
like that's how you could
Oh
do that.
yeah, computed. Oh, nice. It's nice. The dollar sign colon is a little bit weird, I admit, but it's very handy and short. It's
Yeah,
succinct. I like it.
that expressiveness, low
Yeah.
boilerplate. Yeah, it's very nice. Um, cool. So that's like pretty much all I have for the intro. And
Okay.
if you want, we can dive into the other demo.
Yeah. Let's go. I want to see some transitions and all that animations. You've been teasing me with it like for weeks leading up
Yeah,
to
I know, I
today.
know. I tweeted
Yeah.
that right after our conversation. You're like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
that's what we're doing."
Yeah.
Um, so I have this demo. So I don't know. I like the Star Wars movies. There's a lot of them.
Me
So we're
too.
we're gonna build this thing where we're gonna show all the Star Wars movies here, and we're gonna let you select them to maybe pick which ones you want to watch,
Okay.
and that'll make them show up in this column over here.
Okay.
So let me go to our main. So this component is our app.svelte,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty much just HTML and some CSS right now. So you'll see, here's our heading, like here's all the markup we're showing, some light styles that we don't need to worry about because that's not really the focus. So what I want to do first is I have this JSON blob here that is a list of all the movies and some details about them, like their title and a poster and how highly rated they are. So now we're going to go into what I was telling you about is the each block in Svelte. So we saw the if block. Now let's look at the each block.
Okay.
So it's going to look pretty similar. The syntax is each, and then the object you're iterating over. So we're going to go over the list of movies, and as movie, and this is going to be like each time the loop runs, this is going to have the current movie in it, and it looks like this. And then the markup inside here is repeated for each iteration through the loop. So if I wanted to do like movie.title, this should show each title on the screen.
Nice.
So that is that. Let it. Oh, one thing I don't know. I think Vue has this, but usually when you use an each, you want to provide a key,
Yeah, I was gonna
especially
ask
if you're
that.
going to be moving these around.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Svelte doesn't require it, and if you're
Really?
just like displaying a static list of data, like it doesn't matter. But when you want the key, is when you're going to be moving these around because the framework needs to know if this list changes. How do I know like what moved where?
Okay.
Um, so in Svelte, that's what the syntax looks like. I'm saying there's an ID property on each movie, and that is the key. So if this list shuffles around, you need to move the list items according to this key. And that's going to get more important when we get into animation later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. I just want to show a little bit more details here. So you might have seen in the data, but we have a poster. So let me wrap this movie in an H2 and then put an image on the screen. That movie. Sorry, sometimes the autocomplete gets a little confused.
Yeah, it's all right. Oh,
So now we're doing 3. We're showing an image and the title for each one.
it's okay.
Uh, Now, one thing I want to call out, so one thing Svelte values is accessibility, which I don't know how familiar you are with accessibility, but it's basically no matter if someone can use a mouse or a keyboard or not, or however they're accessing our web page, we want
Yeah.
them to be able to get the information they need.
Okay.
So one important thing there is like right now we're just putting an image, but if you can't see the screen, like you don't know what this image is. So it needs something called alt text, which describes the image to the person navigating the page.
Mm-hmm.
And Svelte actually is giving us a warning saying, hey, you forgot the alt attribute on that. You made something inaccessible. So it's going to remind you as much as it can. You know, there's limits to how much it can check at compile time, but it's going to remind you when you can do something better in regards to accessibility,
Oh.
which I think is cool.
Yeah, that's nice. Like it sort of guides you so that you add of all the bells and whistles for accessibility. All tags are important, really. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
like it.
sorry. I tried to import
Okay.
something. Okay. So yeah, so I gave it an alt text and the warning went away. So I'm saying, poster of Star Wars so that it describes what that image is to people who need it. Cool. So that is like a basic movie component. And I want to add some more styles to this, and we could just style it right in this component. But it's going to be easier if we move it into its own component just to scope things down a little bit. And we're eventually going to want to show these movies over here. So that would also be handy to have its own component so we don't have to duplicate this. So let's do that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go into the lib folder, create a new file, movie.svelte. All the svelte components end in .svelte, and usually the convention is a capital letter to start them with. And to start with, I can just copy paste this markup over there. This is this markup is a valid svelte component. You'll notice it's complaining about not knowing what movie is.
Yeah,
And
it is
this
something
is
like
where
a
we
prop.
need exactly. So this is something else that might make you uncomfortable depending on how familiar you are with JavaScript.
Oh boy.
But in Svelte, if you want to let the consumer set a property in this component, you do export let and the name of the prop. So
Wow.
Svelte has taken the export let syntax, which doesn't necessarily make sense in normal JavaScript
Yeah.
to write it like this. But in here, like if you think about it, export is like I'm exposing something to the outside and declaring a variable. So this is a variable that's exposed to the outside. So yeah, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I'm thinking about it because wow. Of course, it's brief. I like the brevity, but it feels a little weird, Like
You get over it,
yeah,
or most
in
people
my
do.
mind, I'm thinking you were spotting a property to be used outside. But what we're really doing is we're telling Velt that this component is going to expect movie to be passed in. So
Yeah,
it's just weird a bit.
it's a little different. And
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I think this might be the last bit of weird svelte syntax we're
Okay.
gonna have to cope with today. So hopefully it should be all
Yeah.
easier from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. So can you type this? Because in Vue, if we have props, we're gonna have like maybe say it's a string or something. Without
Yeah.
TypeScript, really, we could do that. But you could also use TypeScript. So how do we do that in Svelte?
So svelte lets you use TypeScript, so that'd be one way.
Okay.
So that's the main way. What I'm going to do is actually, are you familiar with JS doc syntax?
Yes, I am.
So I'm going to just use that just because I didn't want to add TypeScript to this. And if
Okay.
you don't know what this means and you're watching the stream or video, like don't worry about it too much. But I'm
Okay.
basically going to say this is the same type as the first element in that movies array. Um,
Mm,
and that will
nice.
just get us the nice, that won't, check anything at runtime. That just gets us the autocomplete in VS Code, which will
Okay.
be useful.
Yeah.
But you can also use TypeScript if you want. And that's very nice to work with in Svelte.
Okay. Cool.
Now we have our movie component. We're exposing a movie prop, and now we can import it. So that's what an importing a component looks like in Svelte,
Okay.
and then replace this with the movie component. So I'm going to save, and the auto formatter is going to do something which I think is kind of neat. You'll notice here we're saying movie equals movie. But so that's totally valid way to write it. But a shorter way to write it is this. So if the prop is the same name as the value you're setting it to, you can just do a one line like this.
Yeah, it's actually sort of the shorthand for objects and the property and the value.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I like it.
If every time I have to write React, I miss this because in React you can't do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice little shorthand.
Hmm.
Okay, so next I want to. Well, how much time do we have? Because I can
Yeah.
like move us along to animations if we need to.
No,
I was also going to show some like.
I
Okay.
think we're good on time. Yeah, we have like 30 more minutes, but you could take
Okay.
this as long as you want. I'm enjoying it.
Okay. Cool. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to do some more. We can leave the animations as the big finisher. Keep watching for those.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so what I want to do next is like we're showing. Actually, sorry, brief detour. Let me copy in some additional styles to this movie
Okay.
component. I don't want to really dwell on them. I'm referring to my other screen where I have the completed version of this, but
Yeah.
just to make things look a little bit nicer. So we have that. I think that's all I want. Um,
Okay.
and you might wonder why I'm writing it like this. We'll be adding some stuff that'll make the structure make a little more sense later, but for now,
Okay.
we'll just apply some styles. Okay, so now we're showing this list of movies, but I mean, there's not a lot, but it would be nice if we had a way to filter down. Like if you were looking for a certain movie, you could search for that movie essentially. So let's look at that next. So what I'm going to do is create an input. We want to label it. So filter. You'll see again a little squiggly. Svelte is warning you like, hey, you have this label, but you're not associating it with anything, and that's
Mhm.
bad for accessibility. So we're going to say for filter. Cool. So we have this input component, but we don't have anything wired up to it yet. So one way we want to get the value of this input right as it updates. One way to do that would be, you can listen to the input event and like assign to a state variable every time the input event fires. That's what you would do in vanilla JavaScript. That's similar to what you would do in React. But Svelte has a nice shorthand for cases like this, since getting the input value is so common. And I believe Vue has something similar.
Okay.
But in Svelte, the syntax we use is bind value.
Oh,
And inside there, you give it a state variable. So I'm going to say let filter equals empty string. And you say bind value filter. So you're saying anytime this text updates, update the filter variable.
yeah. So that's like V model in Vue. Got it.
Exactly. And just to show it work, I'm going to just like put the filter up in the heading really quick. So
Oh.
automatically updates. So now we want to do something with this filter. So this is where we're going to get back to reactive statements. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a reactive statement because every time filter variable changes, we want to like update our list of filtered movies.
Okay.
So I'm going to call this filtered, and it's going to be movies.filter, which basic JavaScript array method, iterate through the list of movies and get the movies that match a certain check. And so we want to get all the movies where the movie's title, and I'm going to lowercase this just so that we don't have to worry about case sensitivity, where the title includes the search term. And again, to lowercase filter, just so it doesn't matter whether you use capital letters or not.
Okay.
So, and again, because so Svelte will understand anytime filter changes, I need to rerun this statement. Anytime movies changes as well, but movies isn't a state variable, so this is always going to be the same. And then to get the filter behavior, we declared this variable, but we're not doing anything with it. Instead of iterating through all the movies, let's just iterate through the filtered movies. So now if I search for Jedi, it only shows the movies with Jedi in the title, Rogue One. So you now have a pretty basic filter search. And again, it's not a lot of code. It's like, yeah, we have a bind value and a reactive statement, and we're there.
Nice. Wow. That is, yeah, it's like aside the colon and the dollar sign, it reads like a JavaScript function. And it's, yeah, so there's no svelte thing in it. It just look like JavaScript. And it's fine. Like I can tell this will be very good for anyone who just learning JavaScript. I want to learn a framework. This would look like home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very simple mental model. So it's very nice to work with. Cool. The next thing I want to do is I want to make these sortable. Right now they're just kind of being output any which way. I want to let the user of this site maybe sort by release date or title or the score of the movie. So let's do that next. We're going to control that with a native select input. Well, actually, let's do the label first. So for sort by, and then put the select on the screen. And you could just like output the options manually. I'm going to create an array to have them. So like let sort options. Actually, this could be a const because like this isn't something we're going to be updating. This is going to stay the same. And what I'm going to put in this array is if you look at our movies list, I'm going to put the different properties we want to let people sort by. So it's going to be title, release date, and vote average. And then again, we're going to use that each loop down here to display each option. So each sort options as option. In this case, this is one of the cases where, you could provide a key if you wanted to. You don't really need to, just because like we're not going to be reordering this list or updating it. It's just going to be static.
Okay. So in Vue, if like the key could be like the index of the array, so how can we get that index out if we wanted to?
Oh yeah. So it's just like this.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all there.
Perfect.
So if I just I can just like output it here just to show you, but yeah, title 0, 1, 1, 2. So yeah, if you need to do anything with index, it's right there for you if you need it.
Perfect. I like it.
So again, similar to the input, we can bind to the value of the select. So let's create a variable to have it. Let sort by, I'm going to just default it to the first option here. And then we can use bind value again. And then similar to before, as this updates, that variable automatically updates.
Nice.
So now, similar to what we did with the filter, I want to automatically sort the elements. So let's do sorted. This is just going to get a little bit messy. So, I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sort function. Sort list, property. List is going to be the list of movies. Property is going to be which sort option they chose. And right now I'm just going to turn the list. We'll come back and implement this. But similar, sorted equals movies, or actually we're going to call our function sort movies sort by.
Okay.
One thing I'm going to do, so this gets into Svelte's reactive statements. I want to switch the order of these. So I want to sort and then I want to filter.
Okay.
And you'll notice the order doesn't really matter here. Like I'm using sorted up here, even though I don't declare it until down here. With reactive statements, Svelte will kind of figure out like, oh, this depends on this, so I need to run this first. Like it does all that work for you, so you don't have to like remember which order these need to be in. That being said, I do like to move it so it reads a little bit better like this, just order-wise, but you don't have to do it. And the reason I did it like this is, if you think about it, sorting is only going to happen like every once in a while. Like they're probably going to sort, and then filter is going to be updated a bunch of times. So by doing it like this, if filter changes, I only have to rerun this statement because it depends on filter. If I did it the other way around, if I filtered the movies and then sorted them, anytime filter changed, I would have to also resort the list, which isn't that big a deal, but like it's a little bit nicer if we don't have to resort when the filter changes.
Okay. That makes sense.
So just a little optimization. So then let's implement our sort method. If you're familiar with the sort method, this is what it looks like. Sort will actually modify its original list, right? So I'm going to just do this syntax, which basically creates a copy of the list and then sorts that, because you can get some kind of weird behavior if you like modify a list and other things are using it.
Okay.
So, and then just the sort function takes a function. I never remember the order for this, but we're going to compare property. So if it's title, if the title of A is greater than the title of B, return -1, otherwise return 1. Something like that. I might be the other way around. Yes, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Because I sort by title, but
Yep. I don't know the order either. I just check that out when I need to.
try one and then try the other.
Yep.
So now it's sorting by title. I can sort by release date, which let me really, like, we're not showing release date. It'd be nice if we did. So let me, again, I'm copying some styles from my other screen.
Okay.
Let's throw the release date on there so we can see it. There we go. So it's right here. Cool. So now we can see the release date sort is actually working. The title sort works. And yeah, that's all there is for that. Is there any questions about what I just showed?
No, I think everything does work, and it's familiar, so it's okay. Yeah.
Cool. One thing I want to quickly do is, we're allowing to sort by vote average, but we're not actually displaying it. So let's jump over here and really quick show it over here. Parentheses. And really quick, I want to show another nice feature of Svelte. So like, let's say we wanted to add a high score class to this. color it green when it's a really high score. One way you could do that, if you want to do it manually, you could be like, if movie.vote average is greater than 8, apply the high class, otherwise apply nothing. Like, this is one way you could do it. But Svelte has a shorthand for this that makes it a little bit nicer to read. So you can write class : high. So this is the name of the class we want to apply. And then the condition goes in here. So now you'll see if we go down to one of the highly rated movies, it's colored green.
Now, that is convenient. And it does read better.
Yeah, it's all the ternaries in here can get a little unreadable.
Yeah.
So that's just
So,
like nice little
okay.
syntactic sugar.
Yeah, so I'm assuming we could have multiple of the syntax on an element.
Yeah, so like if we wanted like a mid class rod, you could do a similar s mid equals movie dot vote average is less than or equal to 8, and average and 6. So you can have as many of these as you want.
Yeah, so that bears one more question, because what if I have like a ton of these? Is there a way to have them maybe in the script tag? Then I could pass in like an array with the yeah, because
No,
yeah,
this has been a feature request. So you're talking like this doesn't work, but can I do like high 2, high 2?
yeah,
No, that has been a feature request for Svelte. I don't think there's a good like syntax for it
okay,
that's very readable. I mean, you can always fall back to the ternaries in here.
okay, all right,
But
that's
that is a common, especially like with people using Tailwind.
yes, we have a bunch of
That's where it's come
classes.
up.
I'm one of them. We have a bunch of those. Yeah.
You're one of those, yeah. No, unfortunately, then you'll have to do it here. You can write like a utility function to help make it more readable, like that kind of thing.
Okay.
But this only works
Okay.
on a single class.
Okay. That's cool.
So now let's start getting towards the animations. The grand finale.
Yay. Some moving
Um,
code.
yeah. So first, we want to provide a way to select the movie. So you want, probably a button to show up here. You click it, and the movie appears over here. So let's start with that. For now, I'm going to just put the button right here, but we're going to move the button around later. Let's put an add on it. And on click. In this case, I'm creating an arrow function here because what I want to do is pass the movie we want to add to this function we're going to create.
Okay.
Function add movie. So what do we do with this? Well, first let's make an array that's going to hold our selected movies. And then when this button is clicked, we want to add a movie to that list. I'm going to do unshift to add it to the start of the array. You could also do push if you wanted to add it to the end. And then, okay, so this is another svelte gotcha. If we just write this, Svelte is not going to update the template. So just to show you what I mean really quick, let me iterate over and show it here just to show you it doesn't work. So if I just call a method on this, clicking add doesn't do anything. Even if I, console.log selected, like you'll see it's actually there. It's actually being added, but the template isn't updating. And some beginners get confused, like why this is. The reason for this is in Svelte, it's actually a simple rule. You just have to remember it. Reactivity is only triggered by assignment. So to get this to work, we have to do something like this. Then it shows up.
Oh, okay.
The reason for this is like Svelte doesn't want to be in the business of determining, which methods on some random object like update it. So it's a lot simpler rule of thumb to just know, okay, for state to update I have to assign to it, then try to remember which methods actually modify it. So that is one svelte gotcha. You can also write it, if you wanted to do it in one line, you could do like this, and then delete those. This has an assignment in it. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm a little bit familiar with this because I think we have something similar in Dot, not Vue, but in Dots, and
Okay.
in a package I use for state management. It's something similar. So I get the idea, but it makes it a little bit weird. At, but it does make sense. So
Yeah, it's a little
Svelte,
bit
yeah,
weird, but it's consistent.
yeah, it does make sense.
Anyway, so with that, we're able to add movies to this list. But one thing is, you can add the same movie multiple times, which I don't love. So like once we add it in this list, it should be removed from this one.
Okay.
And the way we're going to do that is we're going to update our filter method to say, hey, when you're filtering, we both want to check the title matches our filter, and we want to check that it's not in the selected list. So selected does not include the movie. So now it disappears from this list, appears in this one.
That's not the problem.
Just want to step back and call out how nice that is. Like we didn't, like all we had to do is like, oh, like declaratively be like, oh,
Yeah,
we don't want to show selected in the filter list, and then Svelte it just worked,
yeah,
and
just
that's really nice.
yeah. It's felt like magic because I was actually thinking you're gonna do like a bunch of logic with if statements and all, but it was just a simple and that did it.
That's the beauty of the reactive statement. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. So really quick, let's implement a remove movie. So you can take it off this list. In this case, let's write the function first. So this one, you got to know your array methods. So what we're going to do is we're going to do to remove. We have to, or let's just call it index. We want to find the index of the thing we're going to remove. So selected find index of the movie, and then selected splice. So you give it an index. So we want to remove things at the index we found the movie at, and we want to remove one item. And then again, selected equals selected. There's a one-liner way to write this, again, if you want to do some spread syntax, but this will work just fine for our purposes. Then if we go down here, let's add a similar remove button down here. Remove movie. That's the movie too. So we can add to this list, and we can remove. And it all just works. We didn't have to really add any additional logic. We're just
Yeah,
updating that selected state, and everything else just flows down from that.
that's beautiful.
And then brief side tour. I don't want to have to keep refreshing the page to reset the list state. So I'm just going to add a reset button here. And in case you weren't aware with Svelte, you can declare this whole function inline if you want to. I'm just going to clear out the selected state. So set it back to empty array, and might as well like reset the filter as well. Now we have this reset button that when you click it, just like deselects everything.
And
So one thing I want to show off, and then so one more thing, then we can get to animations.
okay.
I don't like where this button is. I kind of want it to appear like over the poster. I think would be nice. And you could probably figure out the CSS to do that in this component, but it would be a lot nicer if this was inside our movie component. So let's try to do that. Go to our movie component. If class equals buttons, and like you could try just to paste it in, but then we start to run into issues, right? It doesn't know what add movie is. And this add text works for this add text works for this version, but not that when we're using this component in the selected thing. So we need to figure out how to address this. One way is, we could do a add movie prop, and like make this a prop as well, like export button text. And that could work. One disadvantage is if we want to add multiple buttons, which like my final demo has, we probably won't get to in this this demo. Then we'd have to add either more props or like an array, or it starts to get a little complicated. So let's not go that route, though it's perfectly fine if it works for you. Another thing we could do is Svelte has this special event forwarding syntax. So by doing on:click, we're basically saying, hey, whenever this button is clicked, forward an event to the component. So this will let you listen to that event here, and then you could do add movie, call it like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not what we're going to go with, but it's an option. The reason we're not going to go with it is also the multiple button case. Like, how do you just again? There's ways around this. You can make it work. But what I actually want to do is something called slots. So I believe Vue has something similar. But what a slot is it lets you insert markup into the component. What we're going to do is we're going to make a slot here. So then instead of having the button live inside this component, we can say, hey, you can put whatever you want in here, and then we can pass markup into the slot like this. And then because it's in that slot, again, going to my other secret screen to copy over some styles. Now we have this, like we're able to control it a little bit better in the component because we know like where the slot appears, so we can style this and have this nice like hover effect. So that's what's nice about slots. It lets you put markup inside the component. So then for our remove button, we can do a similar thing. Oops, not that. And there we go. Am I right? Does Vue have something similar to this?
Slots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we do have slots, named slots, and even some other attributes of slots, which are really, really useful. But it just seems similar a whole lot. The whole slot syntax.
Svelte has name slots as well. Don't need to get into them here, but yeah, if you want to have multiple places to insert content in the component, that's something you can do.
Nice.
Cool. Okay, so I've made you wait long enough.
Okay.
Let's get to some transitions and animations.
Oh yeah.
Actually, notice I forgot a key on this, which will be important later. Okay, so Svelte has, as I mentioned, it has built-in transitions, and what a transition is when something is added to or removed from the page, we can play an animation. So you might fade it in and out. You might like have it fly off to the right and fly in from the left. All those sorts of things, which in some other frameworks you might have to reach for an external library to do. In Svelte, the basic stuff is just built right in to make it easy, and you don't have to think about it. So let's start with a basic transition. Let's start by having these just like fade in and out. Because like if you notice right here, like it's a little like abrupt. Like if I add something, it kind of just like disappears and appears all at once. And it would be better for users' understanding of the page if there was a more gradual transition, so they kind of understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So Svelte has a Svelte transition package that you can import the built-in transitions from. You can also write your own, which we won't get to today, but see the docs for that. Built-in ones, there's fade, blur, crossfade, draw, fly, scale, and slide. For now, we're going to start with fade. The way you apply a transition is with the transition : syntax. It can only be applied to HTML elements, so we can't write it on a component, but it's this little transition colon fade. And now just fades out and fades back in. If we want the same thing on the selected list, that's that's just a nice little effect.
Yeah.
That just adds a little bit of polish. Like I mentioned, there, if you want to see a different transition, there's slide. So we could do transition colon slide. Like slides up. It's kind of fun.
Wow.
But yeah, all built in, just there on the shelf, ready for you to use it. So that's a fade. We're actually going to jump to a more advanced transition because it's a really cool effect. It
Okay.
requires a little bit more setup though, but not a ton.
Okay.
So the problem is, this is disappearing from here and appearing over here. Like conceptually, they're the same thing, but we're treating them like two separate elements just because that's what they are on the page. We're fading out one and fading in the other, and there's no connection between them. So Svelte has a built-in called a crossfade transition that's going to let us slide one over to the other, so that there's that mental connection that those two things are related. So it's a transition you can import. The reason it requires more setup is because it returns two transitions, because we need to put one on the element that's disappearing and one on the element that's appearing so they can kind of coordinate. So let me copy this over. And this is just copied from the docs. And I can explain what this means really quickly. So you pass it a few properties. You can pass it a duration. I think there's other things that we're not setting, but we're saying this is going to take 500 milliseconds or half a second. For easing, we're just using quintout, which is just a default. And what easing is it determines how it moves. So the basic easing would be something like linear, where it just moves completely at the same speed, and there's no ease in or ease out. Quintout will make that a little nicer, but we'll kind of start out. I don't remember what it actually is, but maybe it starts out fast and then slows down a little bit and then slows into its new place. So that determines how it moves to its new position. Svelte has a bunch of built-in easings to play around with. And then we want to fall back, because using crossfade, we're not always going to be taking things from one place and putting it to the other. Like when we filter here, the things that disappeared didn't go somewhere.
Okay.
The fallback is for, hey, if it's not being sent anywhere, what do we do instead? We're just going to do a fade. So let's apply this. So it returns two transitions. And I don't think the order matters, but what we're going to do is we're going to say in receive. So when it's being added to the page, it's going to receive the transition. That helps it coordinate. And what it requires you to do is pass a key, similar to a key to each bloop, because it needs to know if something's being added to the page, what identifies it. What should I check to see if it's being removed? In receive, out, send. These are the two things returned from that function, the crossfade function I called.
Yeah.
Now we have this, and we just need to apply it both places so that when it's added or removed from this list, it triggers a crossfade, and when it's added or removed from this other list, it triggers a crossfade. You'll notice the in and out syntax. That's usable with any transition if you want to change what transition happens when it comes in versus when it comes out. The transition thing we used before just combines them. That's when you want the same transition for in and out.
Okay.
But so now with that, I think it should work, assuming I didn't screw anything up. Look at that.
Wow. And that's just amazing.
Right? And just not a lot of code. You didn't
Yeah.
have to make a decision what library to use. Oh, that was nice. Let me get that again.
Yeah. That was magic. Magic.
Yeah, pretty magical.
Yeah. Svelte magic. I like it. So there's two things that I think I like right now is how Svelte focus on giving you or letting you write accessible code as much as possible and
Yeah.
transitions because if you're building on the web, you need accessibility and you might need transitions if you're building apps on the web as well. So Svelte don't want you to go figure that out using maybe JavaScript animations with maybe GSAP or CSS animation and just I'm not very good at those really, but with this, that's what I say. Like I'm not really good because you have to find out the keyframe and do some thinking,
Oh yeah.
and it might work sometimes. It might just screw up. But with this is very very convenient and it's really enticing if you want to do a whole lot of animations and transitions. So you're moving things around, like maybe in a to-do list, like you want to change the order of the list as you're dragging them all this kind of stuff would come in easy with Svelte, I think. It
Yeah.
does make
And
sense, yeah.
yeah, that being said, you mentioned GSAP and CSS animations
Hmm.
and transitions. You can still all use that with Svelte,
Yeah,
right? And there are definitely cases where like these transitions only play when things are added and removed, and there might be animation cases where that doesn't happen. But yeah, it is nice just to have it there, and you don't
yeah,
have to think about it too much, and just very easy to add.
yeah, I like it.
There is one more thing, and this will also be pretty quick, but
Okay.
there's one more animation thing I want to fix about our page.
Hmm.
Like it's nice that they're going to the other list, but then like once it finishes transitioning, there's kind of that jerk, like as things pop back into their new position. Um, like there's that white space,
Yeah.
um, and it'd be nice if we could fix that. Uh, Luckily,
We
not
can.
probably not surprised, but Svelte has something built in for that.
Yeah.
So in this case, this is called flip, which could be a confusing name if you're not familiar with it. Flip
Okay.
is actually an animation technique used to like move things to their new position.
Hmm.
Um, I think I forget what it stands for, but you can look it up. It's not a Svelte specific term. It's an animation concept. But with this flip, you're limited to using this inside in each block. But what we can do is again, one line. If we do animate flip, uh, that will solve our problem.
Wow.
It's a little slow right now. All
Hmm.
the animations and transitions in Svelte let you set parameters. So we can set like duration 300. Um, this and this might look confusing syntax. I didn't touch on it before, but it's actually no different than what we've been doing. You're just passing an object like
Okay.
inside Svelte curly braces.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so duration 300. That should speed things up a little bit. And let's do the same thing on our selected list. Look at that. Isn't that nice?
It's perfect.
Same thing when we filter. I don't know. It's a much smoother experience.
Yeah.
Um, just really, and one line, uh, just to get that, which is I think is incredible.
Hmm. Totally.
Cool. I mean, that's all I have to show off today. There's a few things I didn't get to in Svelte. If you're interested, I definitely recommend checking out the tutorial. If you go to svelte.dev, there's a great interactive tutorial. It just covers everything, uh, and people seem to really like. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you want to learn more.
Yeah, definitely. I am definitely gonna check it out. But this is more than enough. Like this is more than a crash course. I think seriously,
Tried
like
to cover as many
literally,
things as I
yeah,
could.
yeah, you did an excellent job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this was fun. This was really fun to build too. Like after our call, I was like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to build, and I just couldn't stop working
Yeah,
on it.
yeah,
So
that's fine. So
excited.
so I've got a couple of finishing questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are just me thinking, okay. So one of them is state management. So if you're building a more complex app, in other frameworks like Vue, we have UX. I think in React, there's a bunch of them like Flux. I don't know. Redux, right? Yeah, that's Redux and the rest. So does Svelte need something like that, or do Svelte has something like that?
This is the one thing I didn't get to,
Uh, yeah,
or
yeah.
one of them.
Okay.
I don't need to go through it, but Svelte has a concept called stores, which takes
Mm,
care of a lot of those needs.
okay.
Let me zoom in. Which what a store is, it's essentially um, an object that other components can subscribe to. So if you have some state that needs to be coordinated across a lot of different components, look into to Svelte stores. You can
Okay.
import them from one place, and then whenever one component updates it, like anything subscribing to it gets that update. So
Nice.
that solves a lot of state management concerns.
Okay.
And there's
Oh,
also ways to plug this into solutions like MobX, or like if you really wanted to, like you can scale this up if you need to.
okay. So one more question.
Yeah.
How about things like routing? Client side routing. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a few different options. Right now, the Svelte team is working on something called sveltekit,
Okay.
which is the equivalent if you know about Nuxt or
And okay.
NGU or Next.
Yeah, I don't know
This is
about
one
those
option
two.
for it. It's going to
Okay.
be include routing, data loading, all that stuff you need to build like a full app today.
Okay.
And then there are also, if you don't want to use sveltekit, you just want to stick with Svelte on the client. There are different community routers you can pull in.
Okay.
To
So yeah. So Svelte do not support officially routing in just Svelte, but the way to go is using SvelteKit. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
sveltekit is the official router essentially. It's still in development, but we recently announced a release candidate, so it's getting
Okay.
close to a 1.0 release.
Okay. That is superb. So yeah, yeah, I think that's all my questions. Okay, not all, but good enough. I would go do my own research because like I will be using Svelte for a project that I'm going to be announcing Monday.
Oh, that's
Um
exciting.
yeah, it's a little bit ambitious, so you just check that out on my Twitter on Monday. But yeah, so thank you very, very much. So before we go, do you like if I want to reach you, ask a question about Svelte, where can we go? Yeah, where can we go to ask questions
Yeah, so
about
a few
Svelte?
different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to dive into this and you have questions, or you're struggling with something,
Mm-hmm.
if you go to svelte.dev, there's a link to our Discord.
Okay.
That's super helpful. There's a dedicated questions channel. People are usually pretty responsive in there to help people out, and it's just a great community. So I highly recommend that. If you want to reach me, the best way is on Twitter, um, which is at Geoff Rich, GeoffRich, with an underscore at the end.
Yeah.
Feel to reach out if you have any questions or anything.
Okay.
And that also has a link to my website where I have some blog posts about different Svelte things.
Okay. Cool. Cool. I'm definitely gonna put all that in the description. So once again, thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed this Svelte crash course. I loved it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for being my teacher today.
Yeah, for sure.